Not too long ago, I used to be heavily into World of Warcraft. After abandoning it for greener pastures, I bounced around a little, escaped from Tarkov, Dead by Daylight, Hunt Showdown, and even a bit of EVE Online. Around this time, let's say mid-2022, I found Stalcraft and played it a bit, but never really got hooked. I don't know why, but the next year I returned and never really left. 3 years later, over 10 hours of video content and just a little over 10k views cumulatively. I'm not saying I'm the greatest Stalcraft player there is, but I think I know more than your average so-and-so. I love Stalcraft. I love its world, its factions, its stories and tragedies. But if a friend of mine asked me whether they should start playing it, I would probably tell him no, which then begs the question, what kind of a game is this? Keeping me hooked for so long, yet still creating in me the need to warn people away from it. For that, we need to start at the very basics. What is Stalcraft? Prologue. The most notable thing about Stalcraft is that, to many people, it's a comical idea that people catch on to fairly quickly. Stalker combined with Minecraft. This identity being a direct result of its original birth, which you'd probably guess correctly if I asked you to give it a shot. Existing as early as 2014, with a server which invited players to partake of a curated experience, a modded version of Minecraft that did its best to provide as close a feel to the Stalker games while still allowing players to band together and traverse this blocky rendition of a zone in player-made parties. What at first was a modded Minecraft client then became an exclusive launcher with its own game engine. Growth and iterations upon the game continuing frequently for an entire decade. If you go to certain places, you'll still find proof of the game's Minecrafty origins, particularly in long-running maps that haven't been updated, where there's still blocky diagonal corners, square and geometric curves, down to being able to find the geometry of a few spruce fences here and there. While us Westerners can only boast to have been around as early as 2022, there are those in the East that can claim to have been around as early as 2014. It's been a long road, not just for the game, but for the team behind it, Expo. And after such a strange origin story that hopefully sheds some light into why the game is, you know, like this, maybe you'll be interested in finding out. What is Stalcraft? Mechanics and the core game loop. The Stalcraft gameplay loop is easy to explain. Simply put, it's an open world PvEVP. When you create your character, you'll have two choices, being a bandit or a stalker. There are lore differences, but gameplay wise, they're the same. One might access maps the other won't, or play through quests the other doesn't, but you won't miss out on anything too important. Later on, the game divides into further factions, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The average gameplay loop looks like this. Spawn, buy supplies, head out, gather resources, and return, doing away with the usual go kill 10 boars type of quest that's been so commonly associated with MMOs. Instead, you're meant to engage with dynamic events in the world. This can range from killing mutants, defending pieces of technology, aiding distress calls, and destroying NPC camps. Completing these events will net you with resources, loot, and reputation. Quests themselves are reserved for more elaborate storylines. Most of them are nothing too special, just special context around an instanced area where you'll be killing someone, but still more elaborate than your average RPG quest. Loot is to be sold back at the base for money, resources are to be kept so you can use them to buy new gear, and reputation will grant you new storage slots and access to that level's gear. Resources are necessary since buying weapons and armor isn't as easy as just paying for it. Instead, you'll progress through something akin to a tech tree, investing in an initial piece of gear and upgrading it with a combination of local resources and money. Buying good gear with raw money is possible, but most of it isn't upgradable, and unless you pay for the highest tier equipment, it'll become obsolete really quickly. This might sound nice and chill, but this is where one of Stalcraft's most important features shows up: other players. Like I said, you're meant to choose a faction upon character creation, and this doesn't just decide colors and aesthetics, it makes you an active participant in the ever-present conflict between stalkers and bandits. You can kill each other freely and with no consequence. In fact, you're meant to shoot each other on sight whenever possible. Simply put, there's not a single moment outside of your faction base where you won't be at least in some marginal level of danger. The moment you step out, it's free pickings for the opposite faction. Depending on the map, you'll either be keeping an eye out for enemies enemies or downright expecting a firefight. And if the threat of players who kill you on sight isn't enough, deadly anomalies, fields of noxious effects, and the ever-present mutant will make sure that you're always one fuck up away from losing everything, except for your gear, only losing your loot. You get to keep your guns, armor, shit like that. This means that dying doesn't lose you everything you worked for, but it does present an instant hamper on your progress, losing you time, money, and the investment on medicine and bullets that you made. One good run that could give you just enough resources to craft the next tier of your weapon tree will suddenly be taken away because, on your way back, you're shot in the back of the head by some asshole who's on his way to gather resources himself. Resources are player bound, so it's not like you can skip the work by killing other players and reaping the benefits of their work. Rather, you can only pick up a bundled bag that contains the dead player's materials. It can only be opened by them. It can then be sold for a shitty amount of money, sent back to the player as a courtesy, or, if you think he'll be desperate enough to pay for it, put it up on the auction house for any amount of money that you want. Of course, you could put it up for 1 billion rubles if you're feeling particularly dastardly. This gameplay loop of gathering resources for extended periods of time and being at risk of losing them in the blink of an eye is what makes Stalcraft so unique, but also what makes most people quit. You can spend a whole hour gathering the shit you need to craft that delectable new gun, but if someone gets the drop on you, or worse, has undeniably better gear than you, you'll be on your hands and knees praying that you can somehow get it back. And this is for forever. Even when you reach the endgame, there will never be a moment where you're not building up towards something, accumulating money, gathering sellables, gathering materials, or looking for artifacts. Every single player becomes a more and more valuable kill the longer they remain in the overworld, and this includes you. Simply put, if you're not into hardcore, high stakes, all or nothing PvPvE experiences, this game will put you in an early grave. It might sound tedious, demoralizing even, and it is, but for the average, fresh newbie, getting to the end of early game shouldn't take more than 2 weeks. And on the way, you're bound to make some pretty interesting memories. Stalcraft's community is oddly social for an MMO. They're always down to bust a move with you or say hi if they can spot you. And if you find the friendliest bunch, you can expect getting a squad to farm with you or even meeting a high-level player who's so dripped out he'll give you something invaluable to you but meaningless to him. I personally like to head back and give out suits of armor, weapons or money, you know, to make sure newbies don't feel discouraged. Here's the thing though, after a certain point, it stops feeling like the game is testing, you know, your skill, your aim, how much you cooperate with your buddies and such. It starts feeling like it's testing just how much of the grind you're willing to endure. Let me explain myself. The game can be defined into 2 parts, early game and late game. Duh. Early game spans the entire southern zone, so swamps, roadside, junkyard, bar, and the associated faction maps. If you're a casual player, this'll be the bulk of your experience, though if this game sinks its claws into you and you turn into a late game fiend, you'll think back with fun nostalgia on the days where you ran through these low stakes fields with such carefree swagger, forgiving amounts of resources to upgrade your gear, having just enough money to refill your bag with ammo and meds, and a constant sense of forwards progression which, accompanied by a fairly decent main campaign, gives Stalcraft a very single player with co-op type of feel. I know that, at least, in my case, my days in the Southern Zone are my most treasured, playing with friends and meeting new people.
Éntrate al tiro, pendejo, conchetumare. Éntrate.
No, ya sí entré, weón. ¿Qué pasó?
Se viene emisión.
Ah, misión acá mismo.
Emisión.
Ah, emisión.
Y ahora afuera va a haber un apocalipsis nuclear.
¡No!
¡Saco, wea!
Lo vieron, me vieron también.
Ahí cayó uno. Está en el río, a la derecha del río.
Ay, pero weón, tú te lo rushaste, weón.
Cayó el otro. Muere, conchetumare, muere. Anda a rematar al uno.
Oh, cualquier loot, weón.
Hicimos justicia, weón. Hicimos justicia. Esta va para todos ustedes, ratas, que me gusta andar robando.
Weón, tengo muchas cosas, no me puedo mover, weón.
A ver, mándame la weá más pesada y vámonos para la casa, weón.
Muerto.
Buena, weón. Fusila ese conchetumare. ¿Te gustaba andar matando conchetumare? Perro conchetumare, muere, weón.
Le dejan la weá ahí, ¿o no?
No, weón.
No, pero es que pensé que. Oh, tiene cualquier.
Esto es guerra.
A la izquierda.
Sufre el poder de las balas perforantes, Perkin.
No.
Ten cuidado que hay radiación ahí, weón.
Muere, weón.
No.
Mira, con el cuchillo, con el cuchillo. Esta va para todos los culiados que se quedan en los choros, weón. Toma.
No. La weá, weón. ¿Qué pasó? ¿Qué pasó, weón? Ah.
This is a very common sentiment held by most players. Seems like Stalcraft has a way of maybe not breaking up friend groups, but it does become repulsive to at least one member of your friend group. You know how there's things that are not for everyone? This is one of those things the most, so to say. Compare that to the late game, where once gear could be attained after a couple of hours of grinding, and then a couple of days, depending on how much you optimize yourself, a new piece of armor or a new weapon can take as long as a month or more if you don't have the time to reliably farm the Northern Zone's most important material, Anomalous Serum. An invaluable resource, you can get about 13 of these in a week, and buying late game gear costs between 55 and 65 of these. That's without counting the other resources you'll need, a grand total of 5 different types, all of them dropping from different types of tasks and being needed in the thousands. Along with that, the amount of maps you'll interact with is much reduced. Depending on your faction, you'll be in the Temple Swamps, home of the Covenant Cult, Serpentine, home of the Mercenaries, Barrier, home of Frontier, Duty Pastiche, or the Institute, home of the Freedom Lookalike faction. The names were changed for legal reasons, but their lore is also decidedly different. These will be your new home maps, and you'll seldom ever go back to any of the other home bases, since there's barely any reason to. The maps are organized in such a way that all factions are now feuding directly with one more than the other. Mercenaries fight against Rise, the Covenant fights Frontier. Long gone are the alternative maps where you could farm safely. Now you will be in direct contact with your enemy factions at all times. With a PvP-centric urban map between them and a PvE-centric resource-gathering map beside them, you will also have the Forge, which before a series of rebalances used to be the most rewarding map, now just being there. Still dangerous enough to warrant heightened rewards, but lacking the ecstatic little fortunes that could be made in a handful of runs. Then there's the sideways maps, Lubitsch and Labyrinth. Lubitsch granting its own materials and giving you a chance at high value items that can be sold for a lot of money. Labyrinth used to be the best place to farm raw money, but without going into specifics, now it's just a place to do season dailies and grind materials. And lastly, and unless you are a clanner, least importantly, the Wild North. 3 maps that at one point were just the one. A recent rework added areas that were sorely missed by classic players. Red Forest and Uran. High risk, extremely high reward, and constantly flooding with your given server's most kitted out players. You'd have to get extremely lucky to gain anything from a visit as a solo. Stillwaters used to be visit able by way of portals in Forge 11, but ever since the rework, it's been sealed away behind a long tunnel full of traps and deadly anomalies, which is to say, there's even less of a reason to visit the Forge nowadays. These are for late game players. Danger is extremely high and loot is fantastic, which means the average you will never get to enjoy them since these are filled with PvP fiends and swarms of clan players with top of the line gear. As you might be able to tell, clan dynamics and PvP isn't a part of the game that I particularly engage with. So, in the interest of objectivity, I got in touch with Bostov, the leading member of Kiga, a clan that has been topping the leaderboards in NA for a while now. The full interview will be shown on screen, but I'll give you the general gist of it. When asked whether being in a high-tier clan changes the game's dynamics at all, he said that endgame is quite open-ended. People still choose to pursue and experience whatever they want. All in all, the game doesn't become too radically different. However, when I asked about political plays in the context of clans, he confirmed something that I thought was just a rumor: the existence of political plays. From competing for overworld activities, poaching players, and even joining rival clans under false pretenses to grab gear or information. I then asked how likely he thought it was for a regular player to join a clan and engage with that part of the game meaningfully. To my surprise, he said it's a reasonable expectation. happen. In fact, some players essentially only log in to participate in clan wars, which means that, assumedly, they do little else. Lastly, when asked about the state of Stalcraft overall, he said that the game's PvE side is severely lacking, operations often miss the mark, abysmal session battles, and NA having population issues, though gunplay is fairly decent. All in all, this reveals that top-tier clan gameplay isn't different, at least mechanically speaking, since on top of the usual gameplay loop, you'll have a layer of politics, coordination, member betting, activity control, and the occasional attempt to disrupt another clan's plans, which very much fits the setting, in my opinion. It's also not as unattainable as I imagined it to be, but even so, that kind of structured, coordinated gameplay doesn't appeal to me personally. I much prefer to stay as a solo roamer while shaking my fist at those who belong to a clan.
That means you haven't known the triumphs and defeats, the epic highs and lows of
Stalcraft Clan Wars.
The early game has a grand total of 12 maps, out of which you'll mostly interact with your site's territories, so it gets reduced to 8. Every 2 maps, you'll be met with a new base, a new reputation level to grind for, new resources to farm, and environments that, even if they don't vary too much in style, are still visually distinct from one another to grant a constant sense of forwards momentum. You're always meeting new people, doing new quests, seeing new sets of increasingly powerful armor and weapons, and getting to take on more dangerous mutants and NPCs. You become more powerful, and the environment around you does so as well. This is a shared, continuous adventure, and you'll be constantly spotting people going about their business, slightly ahead or slightly behind. If you ask me, early game is where Stalcraft shines at its brightest, far from the artifact min-maxing brain teasers, the optimized farming of season capsules that got replaced by chore-like dailies, and time-gated season pass progression. You can take life easily, and your life can be taken twice as fast. It's intense, it's low stakes, and it's plenty of fun. Late game has a grand total of 14 maps as well. Due to faction associations, you'll mostly ever interact with 10 of them, and if you're the type to avoid areas with heavy PvP, the number will be even further reduced. Long gone is the sense of adventurous wonder, of constant forwards momentum, and seeing, meeting, and doing new things. Once you reach the end game, there's little reason to turn back, so unless you give yourself a reason for it, this is what you will be seeing for the rest of your Stalcraft career. This means that late game becomes boring. If you haven't quit at this point because you couldn't beat a main campaign boss, or rage quit after losing a particularly valuable amount of materials, this is the last great filter you'll be constantly faced with. Stalcraft hell is hell, not because you'll hate it, but because you'll find reasons to stay, even when to everyone else it might seem like there's little to no reason. But this isn't like an awful hell where you end up with rapists. This is like a cartoonish version of hell, like Ugly Americans. It won't take long before the amount of time that you spend in the north dwarfs massively the amount of time you spent in the south, where once you used to see new places, meet new people, and do new quests, now you have spent hundreds of hours in the same maps, doing the same thing, in the same places, around the same people. Content access, content drops, and events. Stalcraft is a free-to-play game, so you might think the game has some sort of a free mode and a premium mode, like most other MMOs in this category. And while it does, it's not as bad as most cases. You can buy Stalcraft Premium, mind you, but this only means a statistical boost to resource gathering, cooler daily rewards, and more space in your storage. You won't be strictly locked out of any of the game's content purely because you don't own a premium membership. The entirety of the game's content can be interacted with and attained, so long as you have the egregious amounts of time to waste or the egregious amounts of money to spend. Plus, you can buy premium with in-game money. It's not small change, but to a late game player, it's not unfeasible to always have premium just through selling loot. Along with that, Xbox is constantly releasing updates, big and medium sized, from new armor sets to balance adjustments and all manner of small, bitty additions and changes. One or two things are always happening every month. This could be considered another one of Stalcraft's features. You won't ever feel like the devs live in some bunker somewhere, sometimes popping out to drop 1 week of content after 6 months of radio silence, which might sound like an exaggeration to some, but it's a harsh reality for people who know about the medium. Of course, that's nothing compared to the season passes. Ever since the Stalcraft X update, the game has seen a new life cycle. Season passes and events used to be relatively rare and short-lived compared to the rest of the game's usual status quo, which was mostly just base Stalcraft with a few updates every now and then. Now, every 90 days we'll see the start of a new season, and every year will bring on a new act. So far, we've had Perun's Grace, an event based on Slavic paganism, Civcas Corporation, the very first season pass after the Stalcraft X update, which worked to introduce what was, back then, the latest villains of the Stalcraft game, a corporation that meddles in zone affairs and fucks with everyone. Very sci-fi stuff. Black Market, event during which the titular faction makes their reveal as a major player in the zone's economy, being accompanied with a game mode event and a new permanent questline that dives into their business. Operation Cryostasis, the yearly Christmas-themed Frosty season, and, if I remember correctly, the first time the Snow Maiden didn't visit. Just for context, before Stalcraft X, Christmas seasons came with the visit of a lady stalker from a future in which the zone covered the world in ice, though from what I hear, she met a most tragic end, her arrival being replaced with that of the Blizzard Stalkers. The other side, time during which the zone's unstable properties became so extreme, players can enter an alternate dimension formed from the Noosphere's world memory. Very cool. This season also brought Hex and his permanent questline delving into such strangeness. Attack on the Perimeter, a lore event that had perimeter security forces attacking the inaccessible city of Pripyat and getting their ass handed by Murmur, Stalcraft's iteration on Monolith, bringing a whole slew of dynamic events and cool, topical gameplay tweaks. Horrors of the Zone, which was a spooky Halloween season, and the Sub-Zero season, the yearly Christmas season once more. Not all of these bring heavy lore, mind you. And most recently, the one that's going on right now, Tempered Steel. The theme of it being, I don't know, something about the military. I believe this season is a direct result of Stalcraft's collab with the Russian version of World of Tanks, Mir Tankov, so I'm not too surprised that it feels a bit, you know, disconnected. The Mir Tarkov channel released a bunch of Stalcraft related animations that are actually really badass. I recommend you watch them. I don't know why Expo hasn't shared these. I'm not particularly into this kind of game, so it's not like I feel neglected by a collab with a game I've no interest in. All of these thematic seasons come with the typical Battle Pass idiosyncrasies you're probably expecting, accomplishing daily tasks to gain points that will advance you from tier to tier, there being a free tier and a premium tier, which will double the amount of rewards you get and give you shit that is straight up better. The premium pass can be bought with in-game currency as well, by the way. Each season pass is 500 levels long, rewards including a bunch of useful shit to upgrade your gear, cosmetics, mid-tier equipment, discount coupons, season and act currency, and if you stick with it to the 500th level, you get the cool final reward, which is either a high-tier weapon or an armor set. If you really no-life the game and get to level 1000, you'll also get an exclusive skin for that weapon or armor. Along with this, there's your typical loot boxes, which give you a chance at cool shit, and the gacha boxes, which grant you a chance at lame shit and very cool shit. The pass can be engaged with and progressed through at any level or area during a playthrough, though unsurprisingly, it might be easier to do dailies during late game rather than the early areas. All of this comes accompanied with some sort of a special game mode or gimmick that is dropped a few weeks into every season's lifespan. Some of them have been on rotation for a bit, and there's been a few newcomers to the lineup. They're all fun in their own unique ways, and aren't samey enough for it to be a problem. Despite their constant name changes, they can all be grouped fairly easily. The Arena of Crows, an event during which two teams fight against each other and NPC enemies in a round-based match, winning granting you increased in-match currency to purchase gear with. Whoever wins the most wins overall. Simple. Though this one hasn't been seen for a long time, not since Grace of Perun. Dead Man's Marathon, Stalcraft's most long-lived game mode and the one we've seen the most. You're dropped into the island of Boreal and compete against other players, gathering in-match currency, gear and resources. Only by extracting do you win and reap any reward worth the time spent. Return to the Inside Out, a PvE event during which, as a solo, you're to wander through a distorted version of one of the game's maps, accumulating currency while buying items to keep you from dying to this place's corrupting influence. My personal favorite, since every so often you'll be able to fight a boss encounter, which is straight up a World of Warcraft Final Fantasy XIV style fight, with having to dodge projectiles and step out of the fire. I personally wish more Stalcraft bosses were like this. Assault on the Perimeter, inspired by Helldivers, a purely PvE event during which 4 teams of 3 are dropped into a map and given a series of tasks to accomplish before evacuating. Very fun, a bit tedious after a certain certain point, but the money and the rewards flowed like a cascade during this. Very poorly optimized though, FPS wise. Lag wise, well, I've yet to see a Stalcraft event that wasn't accompanied with egregious amounts of lag. So much so, this copy pasta has become quite popular, this being the quick follow-up of warnings you will get in chat whenever the server doesn't agree with what you're trying to do. Horrors of the Zone. This one's only been seen once, very Dead by Daylight-esque. Survivors being chased around in a lair by the hunter who has heightened speed but restricted movement. Though Stalcraft stands out by giving players the chance to fight back with weaponry, and the generators are swapped for cute little Simon Says style minigames. Christmas, not a game mode, but a world event that changes gameplay itself. During the Christmas season, the map will be given a winter look and Christmas gifts will be added to the loot table. Depending on the risk of any given maps, the gifts go from shitty to awesome. The most valuable ones can be sold for massive amounts of money, but only if you make it back. Every Christmas season, bringing with it the return of the worst unofficial player faction, Gift Marauders, campers who will park themselves in high traffic areas and kill you for your gifts. The value of the gifts is because during this time, everyone is part of the Christmas tree competition. Opening gifts grants you decorations, and accumulating many of the same decoration makes it more valuable. The more valuable the decoration on your tree, the higher the score you get. The higher your score, the better your Christmas reward. Not only loot boxes, but special league rewards for those with the most decked out trees. Christmas is a great time to accumulate money and gear for the rest of the year. Even if the game itself gets boring, these always are fun enough shake-ups to the formula. I know for a fact that most of my playtime is when one of these pops up. In the end, the greatest, most important question is Stalcraft worth playing? I have two answers for that. Firstly, that's a question that you must truly ask yourself and come to your own conclusions. That's not my YouTuber way of coping out and telling you to do the work for me, but some of you have to understand that if a long-time MMO player heard most of this, he wouldn't go, "What? This game fucking blows ass!" He'd go, "Oh, so it's like most other MMOs except for this and this and that." The genre itself can seem repulsive to the average casual gamer, and I mean that in the most benign positive way, because it demands a lot of investment, being time, attention, and if you're so inclined, money. Personally, for as fucked as I think Stalcraft is in its current state, it's still not worse than World of Warcraft Shadowlands. At least, I'm not paying a monthly fee to play a shitty, lazy, boring expansion that had a fun value of -10. Not to mention the constant sense of doom brought on by Blizzard devs stealing human milk from fridges. Say whatever you want about Expo, but I much prefer my MMO company to be full of beer drinkers over breast milk stealers. If you're willing to try out a new, intense, cool experience that will take away about 50 hours of your time, feel free to play Stalcraft to the end of your faction's storyline, because once you reach the end game is where most of the problems lie. Grinding that feels meaningless, nerfed rewards, events that never come out good and always need to be fixed later down the line, and the constant chasing of mirages with the promise that the next major update might just be the one to change this all for the better. I used to be heavily into Escape from Tarkov, and I chased the Streets mirage for years, only for it to come out and not mean shit for any actual improvement on the game. For the last few years, Stalcraft had a mirage of its own with operations, waiting for so long for our own version of mythical dungeons, only to get 2 maps, shitty time-gated rewards that prevent you from grinding, hordes of bullet sponge enemies, and ultimately nothing particularly fun or new. I'll tell you this much: if after hearing about all of this, about the good, the bad, the ugly, the mediocre, you still think you'd enjoy yourself just a little, just a bit, maybe perhaps, you should give it a shot. There's nothing quite like it in the genre, besides maybe Albion Online. There's always some sort of event going on, the early game is fun and heart-racing, and best of all, it's free, so you won't lose anything but your time, and hopefully you'll make some fun memories along the way. Having said that, if a close friend of mine ever hit me up and said, "Hey, mediocre, I've seen you playing Stalcraft a lot, is it fun? Should I join?" I would tell that friend, no, don't join, because the last thing I would wanna do is saddle my friend with the time investment that he probably could be enjoying doing something else. To close this perspective, I'll go ahead and address the Stalcraft players. because there must be at least 10 of you that will watch this video just to gauge another player's opinion, having doubts of their own as to whether they should continue playing. I will say the following. Expo doesn't owe you anything. Don't click off. Let me elaborate. Expo doesn't owe you anything. They don't owe you fun or a rewarding game experience or cool loot. You are not owed any of this. These things are not hidden away in some Expo vault and right around the corner just waiting to be added, which is why, if you're not having fun, you should not stick around. Don't just keep playing and being miserable, hoping you'll get the experience you were expecting in some nebulous, fuzzy, non-defined future. And if you do leave and it does get better in the future, you can always return in said future. You won't be barred from entry just for taking a break. A game earning your time in the future is far better than one that holds your time hostage right now. Don't stick around hoping you'll get what you think you are owed, because that's how you become part of the sunken cost fallacy cult. Playing a video game you hate solely because you think you're in too deep to give it all up now. Criticism is healthy. Sitting around and being miserable for hundreds of hours isn't. If the only reason you're still playing is because you've already spent X amount of time or X amount of money in the game, then it stopped being a fun, engaging hobby. You are in a hostage situation of your own creation. The same way Expo doesn't owe you anything, you do not owe anything back to them. So don't feel bad for stopping your investment. They demand time and money, and we demand fun and engagement. If any part of this transaction fails, it's only reasonable to step away. Video games, as much as we want to develop parasocial relationships with the developers, are still just transactions, not moral obligations. If I had to make one final descriptive statement on what I feel about the game as a whole, it would be something like this. Stalcraft is a fantastically different, hardcore MMO experience that absolutely nails its early game, yet once you get to the late stage, the experience rapidly dulls, monotony only being broken by seasonal events.